What's going on, Packers fans, Vikings fans, maybe some Bears and Lions fans, football fans in general? Welcome to the Pack-A-Day podcast and Paul Farrington Show collaboration to end all collaborations. My name is Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You know, Robert Ziggy Ziegler, and of course, the one and only Paul Farrington. You can find them on social media at Farrington Show. Fellas, how the heck are you guys doing?
Doing great. It's awesome to be back with you, Andy. It's been way too long.
Totally agreed. Ziggy, how are you?
It's great. Summer has come. I no longer have academic responsibilities for the year, so I can just ride it out and watch some football tape.
Andy,
I'm at too.
A couple weeks ago now, during I think it's the second round of the draft, or right before the second round of the draft, I'm setting up for our live stream. I get a frantic text from Ziggy. It's like, hey, need you to send me over the link to Andy's Zoom right now. I think he just sent it over. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? And Ziggy calls. He's like, hey, yeah, Andy said I could join his show. So I go looking. I'm looking around like, okay, let me shoot over to you. And I hear Ziggy going like, I'm coming, Andy. I'm coming, man. I'll be there in a second. And of course, I throw on Pack-A-Day, and I was enjoying watching the two of you guys talk over a little bit of the NFC North for just a few minutes there, but it was really fun. Ziggy was very pumped up, and he might not have told you that, but Ziggy was very excited to be I'd say an unexpected guest.
No, it was great. It was fantastic. I appreciate you coming on, Ziggy. The whole thing is just such a blur. I don't even know that I could tell you what we talked about in that 15 minutes, just because everything, or however long it was, because the whole thing just zoomed by in the course of like a week that feels like a fever dream in hindsight. But no, I appreciate you coming on. That was awesome. Just breaking down some NFC North stuff. And I'm excited to break it down with you guys today as well.
There could be more Ziggy complaining about Caleb Banks on this show. You don't know.
No, boy.
Maybe. I'm excited to get there. Let me just ask you this. We'll start off here. Just in general, doesn't have to be anything Minnesota Vikings, draft pick related. Just how was your overall draft experience? I feel like in general, the draft really is an experience. It feels like there's not really any comparison for it. It almost feels like a game because you're watching it intently and you feel like every pick is a win or a loss, even though we have no idea and we're not going to know for years on end whether these players are going to work out or not. But in the moment, everything feels like it's on the line, and it's just the greatest experience. So just in general, how was your draft weekend?
I love the NFL draft. Ever since I was a kid, I've always enjoyed. It's just the build-up is amazing. I love learning about the players. The Vikings were usually picking pretty high, so it was fun. It was fun learning about the top players, especially, and playing out scenarios for the guys you want to fall. I will say one thing that was very disappointing was, as there were all the mocks, the top 10 mocks going into the week, I couldn't stop thinking, man, when we were 4-8. Going on that 5-game win streak to end the year, it would have been a lot of fun. When working for Nick Wright, we're talking about the Chiefs at 9 and all the different ways they can go. Like, should have been me. Like, it should have been us. But I had a great time, and we did a live stream on Twitch for the first time, I think, a Twitch stream. So it was fun to. Last year we were in Green Bay. Kind of nice to just hunker down and be at home.
And I have to say, I don't care what NFL GMs think. Keep the first round picks to 8 minutes. Like, the draft show flowed so much better this year.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I think back to when it was like 15 minutes a pick, and it would just be hours on end waiting for things to happen. GMs trying to get guys interested in their picks. Like, this year, it really felt like once that first round of the draft got moving, maybe it's not great if you're streaming every round and it's a gigantic blur, but I thought it was a lot of fun to just see things go and feel like I was playing catch up rather than trying to find ways to fill air.
I like the 10 minutes. I realize I'm in the minority. I realize I'm the nerdy one that I'm cool with everything breathing a little bit more from time to time. But the 8 minutes was not bad by any stretch of the imagination. I felt like the NFL and NFL Network, ESPN need to sort of fix it a little bit. It didn't feel like they were already always on pace. But for somebody again like us both hosting our own shows, yeah, it was very streamlined, and you never really felt like anything was we were falling behind or anything like that. So from that standpoint, it worked really well. Yeah. So overall, I just thought it flowed well. And again, from a content standpoint, I felt like, it was really easy to fill the time. Almost at times, like it wasn't, enough time. But I know I'm in the nerdy minority there. The other thing I wanted to follow up on before we get to some of these, draft picks that were actually made, which we're going to spend the majority of the time on and do some fun superlatives today. I got to ask you, a couple of years from now, I know you guys made the trek to Green Bay for the draft in Green Bay. It sounds like there could be some real possibility of an NFL draft with the Minnesota Vikings in Minneapolis. A, what is the likelihood? And B, how are you guys feeling about that?
It seems like it's going to happen, doesn't it? From everything I've seen, it seems like it's not a lock, but kind of getting close to that. If it's there, we have to go. I mean, that is a must go. Now, it's amazing that in Minnesota, at least for us, probably less warm of a reception than if we go to Green Bay for the draft, amazingly. But at least for me, I would, as a fan, right, I would love to get out there. It's the closest you could get to heaven is being in Minneapolis. So that's it would be a must go.
Now, I've never actually seen US Bank Stadium, so it would be cool to just go out and actually like see where my team plays. The only NFL games I've been to are at Soldier Field and Lambeau Field. So like having to go and see the Minnesota Vikings, but not have to watch the on-field product might be pretty nice.
Okay. All right, Ziggy. All right.
Oh, you know.
I unfortunately did have to go, or not have to. I went to US Bank once, and unfortunately the Packers lost that game. It was a very good game. I got to experience the fake snow in your stadium. Yeah. So there was that.
Which game was it?
It was probably I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago now. I know Green Bay lost. I don't even remember the exact year, the exact situation that it was.
Well, they do that so much in Minnesota. Yeah. You see why you get confused.
Exactly. Was Kirk there?
Oh my goodness, I don't even remember. That was one where I went for fun, and the whole weekend might be a little bit of a blur for me.
Oh yeah. Understood.
One of those.
Kirk may have been there. Who knows?
Yes, I may or may not have been there actually, but I'm pretty sure I was there. All right, so yeah, I think that would. Yeah, it seems like I know they have that full sort of area right in front of the stadium that would potentially be good for it. It sounds like it might be in the stadium as well. Either way, I'm a pretty big proponent of any team that has the ability to and wants to host it. I mean, spread the wealth. It's just a cool experience for the hometown team to be able to host it. Yep. So yeah, I think it would be really cool for you guys if that were to happen.
Oh, it'd be great. You'd have to come out, Andy. You'd have to find your way there.
The funny thing is I didn't even go to the one really in Green Bay because I was, recording the entire time. It was in my backyard and I didn't go. I went to Vegas, and I think that's probably going to be the only one that I go to. Even that one, I didn't stick around very long.
Don't remember much of it.
No, that one I do. It just, we were in a huge crowd of people, and I knew like the picks, like I knew Stingley on my phone before, it even got announced, and just like, I could literally be anywhere right now. Why am I standing in a crowd of 10? I'm in Vegas. Yeah. We could be having so much more fun. Why am I standing in a crowd of people just waiting for somebody to announce a name at a podium? But no, I mean, it's really tough with just doing this, full time of, that's, I mean, the draft weekend this weekend this past, whatever it was, a week and a half ago, without a first round pick was still our most downloaded, streamed, viewed weekend in the history of the Pack a Day podcast. And we didn't even have a first round pick.
Congrats. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, thank everyone for who watched. It was because Ziggy was on actually.
Yeah.
That our numbers spiked in a pretty significant way. But no, it was really, really cool. But I mean, it's just that sort of weekend, and it's tough to be like, well, I'm actually going to take time off to go and listen to picks. But yeah, either way, it would be really cool for you guys if it was in Minnesota.
Yeah, would love to get out to it.
Big time. All right, well, let's break down this draft now. Of course, from a Vikings standpoint, your fans have heard you break down the Vikings, but our Packers fans have not, and some of the NFC North fans who are listening may not have. So we'll let you guys just give a brief rundown of the Vikings picks and your just general thoughts. We're going to get to a lot of it in the superlatives, and then I'll do the same for the Packers, and then we'll just do a quick rundown of Lions and Bears, and then we'll get to the fun part, which is our NFC North Draft Superlatives.
Yeah, so Ziggy, we could kind of go back and forth here, but there was one thing heading into this, Andy, and I think the general overview of the Vikings draft class is you look at every single grade and the Vikings get a bad grade on this draft. And it's understandable because they swung for the fences a lot, right? Caleb Banks in the first round is a big swing. Jake Golday, a lot of unknown with Jake Golday. And I just think the more you go down, it's like, okay, the Vikings were a team coming into this. I've said this stat a handful of times, but I really think it needs to be said again. Alec Lewis put out a tweet. 61 players on the Vikings roster, 6 of them are from the second, third, and fourth rounds, which is the lowest number in the NFL by almost 10 players.
Wow.
And you just think about how this team is drafted for the past handful of years, and there's just no production. You're getting nothing from the second to fourth round of the draft. It is just an unbelievable stat. And walking away from this draft, with a lot of guys that you're kind of, could it work out? It might. To me, I don't mind taking the swings, but it was just an interesting philosophy for a team that fired their GM, a team that clearly needs to draft better, they're like, all right, we're just going to keep going for it. And that was a takeaway to me of like, oh, wow, I'm surprised they weren't a little safer with some of their picks, whether that's turning Caleb Banks into Caden McDonald or Peter Woods, or even later on down the road. I'm just a little nervous about, man, are we still going to continue to get nothing out of those middle rounds?
I do think, though, there was a huge mismatch between sort of what the national media felt like the Vikings needed and what us who were talking about the Vikings and covering the team more felt they might do. Right? Basically, every mock draft you saw had the Vikings going safety in the first round. Basically, everyone said they need to work on like getting a wide receiver 3 or addressing the center issue. And the Vikings didn't really do any of that. They said, we're going to take size on the defensive line with Big Citrus and Caleb Banks. We're going to take a tackle, even though we've got 2 good tackles. We're going to take Jake Golday, even though he doesn't have a clear starting role at the start of the year. Jacoby Thomas was our safety coming out of Miami, but that was at the end of the third. And I actually really liked that approach from Minnesota. I was saying before the draft, we should be open to offensive tackle. We should be open to defensive tackle. Because even if Kyler's great next year for the Vikings, which is not a guarantee, this is just a team that has needed size on the offensive and defensive line for a while. We've got a huge decision coming up with Brian O'Neill. So even though I think a lot of the draft grades, as you said, Paul, are really negative, a lot of that is coming from people having, I think, misguided expectations about what Minnesota actually needed going into this draft.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a reason that they took defensive tackle with 2 of their first 3 picks. They allowed almost 30 more rushing yards per game last season than they did the first 2 under Brian Flores. And the goal was to get bigger. And they got a lot bigger, right? Caleb Banks, almost 6'6". I love Big Citrus. That nickname is just so good. But, you know, he is a massive dude. He's 322 pounds. He's a run stopper through and through. So I was pretty happy. I was actually happy with the approach of, hey, let's try and elevate this already elite defense. And then it all just comes down to Kyler Murray. Like, what's he going to be? And if he is even mediocre, you have to think the defense should be pretty nasty, and the Vikings are going to be able to compete in the North.
Couple things based on your statistic from earlier, Paul, with the lack of day or the middle round picks on the team. I really miss Kwesi. What a mistake by you guys to get rid of him. What a huge bummer of an NFC North offseason that Kwesi is no longer on the Minnesota Vikings. So very sad about that. And then clearly, as I talked to you on, I think text, Paul, Ziggy, I may have said it to you as well on the show. Clearly, a lot of overcompensating for losing Javon Hargrave. I mean, that's clearly what's going on here in Minnesota. Javon Hargrave goes to Green Bay, and you guys immediately feel like, well, we've got to spend 1st and 3rd round picks to replace him. So it's understandable. I get it. But I actually think I like your Vikings draft a lot more than the national media. Although the last time I complimented you guys, I said I really liked the JJ McCarthy draft pick, and that has not gone very great. So what the heck do I know? But
well, Andy, the same way that Ziggy deals with his the rumors, like we all know, closeted Viking fan Andy Herman.
Yes, not quite. But what I will say is, I thought if there was a draft to take those home run swings when everyone in the draft is a degree of bizarre, either there's some red flag with, they don't have the athletics traits, or whether it's that they have some off-field issue, or that they've got an injury, or they're not a premium position, or there's just something with everybody. Like, you get to like pick 5 and you're already compromising on something. And so to take a player in Caleb Banks, so I think if everyone in this entire draft reaches their ceiling, I think Caleb Banks is in the top 5 or 6 players of people in this draft, if that were to be the case. Yeah. Especially in this draft, I don't mind that philosophy. And it felt like they did that on a few different occasions. And I just think if there was ever a draft to kind of do that, and especially, again, if we want to see me not be a closeted Vikings fan, if the team that's kind of projected to be the 4th place team in the division and might just need a jolt here or there, you know what? Let's take a few real ridiculous swings at this thing, see if we get a couple things that hit, especially with a coach like Brian Flores leading them. You guys went defense heavy in this draft. I think there's a lot worse ways that you could have navigated this. And I think that if you get a couple of these things to pay off, it's going to actually end up looking like a really good draft.
Well, they were pretty upfront about it too. They came out and pretty much said, we want home run hitters. Like that. Yep. That's what the Vikings said. And they went after with that philosophy. So if that was the plan, it might not be one that pays off ultimately. And then we're going to be sitting here next year and that list of players is just going to continue to grow. Or we could be here saying, that was the difference in turning us back into a playoff team.
I think it's an interesting juxtaposition with the Packers draft class, because the Packers draft class, I have a harder time figuring out where the All-Pro or Pro Bowl maybe players are going to come from this class. But I do feel like there's a lot of singles and doubles in this list. If there is, one of that high upside play, maybe a little bit more of a home run swing, I think Denai Dennis Sutton in the 4th round has maybe a little bit more of that capability of just being a super freak athlete, had good productivity. The tape doesn't always match it, but there is definitely a big time player in there somewhere. Whether or not they can get it out of them, that's a totally different story, but that's probably the one. But this is a draft where Brian Gutekunst really went shopping. And this is another way to look at it. I think the one is to say, this is a flawed draft class. Let's swing for the fences and see if we can connect on a couple things. The other is to say, this is a flawed draft class. Let's not try to be perfect here. Let's just get good players at positions of need. Everyone has like the rounds 2 through 4 completely jumbled. A team might have a guy in round 2. Another team might have him in round 4 off their board entirely. So you know what? We don't even have to focus so much on like, well, let's get the best player available, but it's a wider. No, you know what? We're going to actually shop for our needs. And I thought Goody really did that in this draft. 2nd round pick, Brandon Cisse. We know they needed corners. Goody specifically said it going into the draft. There was no subterfuge. He's like, we need numbers at corner. It was the only position that they drafted 2 of, with Cisse in the 2nd and Damani Jackson in the 6th. They needed a nose tackle / defensive tackle. They get that in the 3rd, and Chris McClellan, they move up to get him. They needed an edge rusher. They were a little bit weak there, especially with Micah being out to start the season. There's Denai Dennis Sutton, and they needed some offensive line depth, and they get that in round 5 with Jager Burton as well. And then they just took a wild card swing at took their 2 7ths, turned it into a 6th, and got what most people believe is the best kicker in the draft to come in and compete with Brandon McManus. So again, I have a harder time finding the true home run swinger, again, a player that might end up being an All-Pro or a Pro Bowl from this list, but I think they went shopping for their needs, and I think they hit a lot of singles and doubles.
The thing I liked about Green Bay was I always get nervous when GMs come out and say, we're going to take picks for players we need to produce right away, because that often leads to really big reaches.
Yep.
I think you saw that. We'll get to this a little later, but I think you saw that a lot of Chicago this year, where they had certain plans of, we need a player at this position, so we're just going to take the guy we like. Green Bay, I think, did a good job of avoiding that temptation. Cisse was a player basically everyone had going between 40 and 45. You got him at 52. DDS was a player a lot of people had in their top 100. You got him at 120. Like, there was good shopping for value among those needs and taking players, rather than just saying, well, we need a corner. There's been a run on corners. We'll take whichever guy's there because we just need somebody.
That's well said.
Yeah, Andy, I'll throw out a couple fun facts. And the listeners of our show have heard me say this in the post-draft reaction, but I'm not sure if you have. Green Bay, it had been 8 years since you guys went 3 straight defensive players to open your draft. To me, it was a pretty clear message of all right, we have a lot of faith in this offense now. Jonathan Gannon, let's give him some chess pieces here. And a really interesting stat that I saw was by quarter last season, the Packers defense points per game allowed. First quarter, first in the league, best first quarter defense. They go to 15th in the 2nd quarter, 10th in the 3rd quarter, 29th in the 4th quarter. Green Bay's defense. And, it's just a disaster. You think about the end of the year and the drives that Chicago had at the end of the games. They barely stopped the Ravens. The Lions game on Thanksgiving which just turned into a shootout. To me, the plan for Green Bay was, this is the side of the ball that needs fixing. Now, the offense had its moments too. I mean, there were times where they disappeared in big spots, but typically speaking, I think you guys have a lot of faith in Jordan Love. And if that defense is able to elevate where you guys were, the number I think was like 11th in points per game and 12th in yards per game last year, the past 3 Super Bowl champions have all been the number 1 or 2 scoring defense in football, and they've all been top 6 in yards per game allowed. So taking that jump up is the step to me that'll turn you guys into that top tier contender. I mean, think about the beginning of the year, right? How the defense was flying around. Everyone said Green Bay's going to the Super Bowl. So I just, some interesting numbers to back up the selections.
It was interesting. They only had 6 selections, so it was going to be a smaller draft class in general, but only 1 offensive player in Jager Burton in the 5th round.
Great.
One special teams player. I know. Trace Mack's even a better name in the 6th round. And then 4 defensive players. So they and again, the top 3, like you mentioned, were all on defense. So a very defensive oriented draft for the Green Bay Packers. Let's run through the Lions and Bears just really quick, just to go through who they selected. So again, as we go through our superlatives, everyone has kind of an idea of who some of the selections were. And then maybe I'll let one of you talk about Bears for a second, one of you talk about Lions, and then we'll kind of go to the superlatives. So let's start with the Lions. They took Blake Miller in the 1st, edge rusher, Dale Derek Moore out of Michigan in the second, Jimmy Rolder in the fourth, linebacker, Keith Abney, a corner in the fifth, Kendrick Law in the fifth, Skylar Gill Howard in the sixth, and Tyree West in the seventh. All right, who wants the Lions? And just a couple quick thoughts on the Lions.
Ziggy,
you take the Lions, Paul. I got the Bears.
Okay, yeah, that should be enjoyable. I really liked the Lions' approach in this draft. They went for need, right? Up front, they needed a lot of help on the offensive line, and defensively, they've needed an edge rusher opposite Hutchinson for the longest time in the world. So you go and you get Blake Miller, someone where you're going to kick Sewell over to left tackle. He's started 97% of his snaps at right tackle. Miller did at Clemson. He's a tough dude, played all the time. And the whole key, I know the Lions offense at times was dominant last year, but it felt like they lost some of that grit that made the Lions who they were when Dan Campbell pulled them out of the gutter. Last year, their pass block win rate's 56%. I mean, that's just not who the Lions were or have been on their Super Bowl quest here. So going and getting some, tough guy up front, really like that pick. And then you get Derek Moore out of Michigan. Michigan edges have suited Detroit quite well over the past, right, with Hutchinson there. He was someone who led the Big Ten in sacks. I really like those first two picks there. And then I'm not going to look at rounds 4 through 7 too much. I mean, I know that that's where you find your gems, but you go and you get another Michigan guy in Rolder who led Michigan in tackles. It's never a bad thing, right, to have Michigan's leading tackler. So I thought they did a nice job, and maybe they'll come up again in the superlatives.
Must be nice for the Lions to be able to draft players from Michigan. The Packers had nobody to draft from Wisconsin. There were no Wisconsin players drafted in this particular draft. So it would have been very bad if Green Bay went in that direction. Chicago, Dylan Thieneman, safety, goes to the Bears in the first. Logan Jones, the center out of Iowa, goes in the second. Sam Roosh, the tight end out of Stanford, in the third. Xavier Thomas, the big, apparently reach at wide receiver, in the third round as well. Malik Muhammad, the corner, in the fourth. Keyshawn Elliott, the linebacker, in the fifth. And then Jordan Vandenberg, the defensive tackle out of Georgia Tech, in the sixth. Ziggy, your thoughts on the Bears draft?
If you had asked anybody, what are the Bears' biggest needs going into this draft, they would have said, we need a second safety, we need a center to replace a retired center, and we need a wide receiver. And in 3 of the first 4 picks, the Bears did that. Whether that was wise or not is a different question. Dylan Thieneman obviously was a player a lot of people were really high on. I don't think there's anything wrong with that pick. They surprised a lot of people by taking Logan Jones in the second round when a lot of people had him as a borderline 4th rounder. Sam Rausch, tight end 3, coming in with their next pick. And then Xavier Thomas, as you said, a lot of people didn't have him on their draft boards or thought he would fall near the end. I'll have more to say about those picks later for Chicago. But just in general, I think things have changed a lot, and you're able to see that because they have a head coach who clearly wants specific things. He has the credibility to come in and say, I want a player who can do this, and we're going to take that. And you just haven't seen that from Chicago in the past, right? Head coaches have not had the sort of credibility that they've been able to get from Ben Johnson going into his second year. So this feels to me like a draft where they said, we were close last year. We believe in our free agent class. We believe in a lot of the gains that we had. We just need to get a couple of the right pieces in, and then we're going to take off.
And Ziggy,
it did feel like,
go ahead, Andy.
I was just going to say, it does feel like Ben Johnson has the ability to say, here's my shopping list. I don't care about value. Get me a blocking tight end. Get me a center who can play. Get me a safety, and especially again on the offensive positions. Get me a speedy wide receiver, gadgety type that I can do some fun things with. I will be able to make that work. Don't worry about where you get them. Just get them, and I'll make it work. And for the first time in, I don't know, maybe since 1985, it feels like there's actually somebody in control of Chicago that actually could say that and actually have it come to fruition, which that along with, I don't like that. I don't like that your GM is gone. I don't like any of this from a Packers standpoint. So no, I think they went shopping for Ben Johnson, and I unfortunately have faith that that's probably going to work out. That's exactly along the lines of what I was going to say, Andy. Is in Chicago, you might kind of, raise your eyebrows at some of the selections, but he's earned that right from his time in Detroit and from taking them to where they went last season, a couple plays away from being in the NFC Championship game. I mean, he's earned that right to take some of those swings where there's not a lot of coaches in football that you would give that long of a leash to with the draft. Just be like, hey, go get whoever you want. McVay can do that. Shanahan can do that. But Ben Johnson's someone who you truly do, I'd say you believe in him at this point. If you're a Bears fan, you're like, go ahead. Whatever you do, I'm going to agree with. Yeah, it's a crazy thing to think about. We've got 14 categories of superlatives that we're going to go over. So we'll try to do these a little bit lightning round because otherwise we'll probably be here for another 3 days. We might not get this episode out in time. But we're going to start with favorite pick of any of these players that were taken in the entirety of the NFC North. So Ziggy, I will start with you. Your favorite pick in the NFC North draft classes.
When I'm thinking favorite pick, one of the big things I'm looking for is how does this player fit on that team? And for me, I think Jake Golday is the perfect player for the Minnesota Vikings. If you ask, I know Paul doesn't love this pick, but if you ask Brian Flores, like, what key player can you take advantage of that nobody else can? The answer is an off-ball linebacker who can rush the passer and play corner. And Jake Golday in Cincinnati in various ways did all of those things. There were a lot of teams that were interested in getting him right behind us. I know Indianapolis was super interested. I'm very excited to see what he can do, and especially as players like Van Ginkel get older. I hope Brian Flores is able to stay with the Vikings, but those are very difficult guys to replace. I think being forward thinking, seeing that potential, and looking at a guy who has a lot of experience but just needs development in a few areas, I think it's a great pick for Minnesota, and I'm really excited to see what he does.
Like that one, Paul?
So, yeah, I'm also going to kind of mold this specific superlative to my personal preferences here.
Go for it.
I loved the Dominique Orange pick. When you just for the name Big Citrus alone.
Thick Citrus even too. That's another one. Thick Citrus is another.
Yeah, I like just for the name alone, big fan of it. But, you know, there's certain guys where I was texting with a bunch of people during the draft. And when Big Citrus came off the board to us, had a handful of friends who root for other teams, just, you know, no, with a bunch of O's following it. And we talked about this before with the Vikings, though. Defensive tackle, really, I mean, it is a massive, massive need for them. And it's felt like they've been pushed around up front on the defensive side of the ball for a while now. Great edge rushers, but we have a big hole in the middle of our defense. You go get someone who he's not going to do a lot rushing the passer, but someone that you could plug in the middle and say, hey, you know, stop Jahmyr Gibbs, stop Josh Jacobs, stop DeAndre Swift. And now that's a bit easier said than done with that talent. But I like getting like someone who you feel a little bit more confident in his ability. And he's a 3rd round pick, so who knows if it works out. But getting someone who can really beef us up a little bit interior, that was important to me.
Orange was a player that a lot of Packers fans wanted. Yep. And when they moved up in the 3rd round, I think everyone thought it was going to be Dominique Orange. And then, of course, you know, it ends up being Chris McClellan in that situation. So that's going to be one that Packers fans are keeping an eye on for a very long time, is who ends up better, McClellan or Dominique Orange? Because Packers moved ahead, had their choice of defensive tackles, and they went with McClellan. And of course, Minnesota then gets Dominique Orange. I'm going to be totally basic and lame with my answer here. I'm taking the guy who was taken ahead of everyone else in the NFC North draft classes. I'm taking Blake Miller. The more and more I watched him throughout the process, the more and more I fell in love with him. And in a draft where nothing really feels certain, and we talked about all the different red flags and positional values, this is a starting tackle who played at Clemson, who played, I think, either 3 or 4 years and was a starter, I think, from the very beginning at Clemson, who had all the athletic measurables, was phenomenal. The tape is fantastic. And you just you're starting to try to poke holes in this, and you have to twist yourself into pretzels with Maui Noah and with Proctor, who I like both of them, but both of them are now moving inside to guard to start their careers, which I think is good for both of them. But here you have Blake Miller, a really freaking good tackle that just falls to Detroit at pick 17. I just loved it. I thought it makes all the sense. The only thing, of course, is that you have to move Penei Sewell to left tackle, but I think Sewell will be totally fine doing that. I thought it was a no-brainer pick. And the more that I got through the process, and there's all these weird, bizarro things, there's nothing for Blake Miller. He's just really freaking good. And of course, he falls to the Lions at a position of need at pick 17. Stupid. Yeah,
no, that's a great favorite pick to have.
All right, let's go least favorite pick. We'll go reverse order this time. I'll go first on this one. I am taking a Viking on this one. I actually didn't. There wasn't a pick in this entire NFC North group that I was just like, what the hell were they thinking? But I'm going to go with Max Bredesen. Not necessarily because I don't like Max Bredesen. There were just players on the board at that time, including the guy that you took a couple picks later in Charles Demings. It worked out for you because you got him anyway. But I like Demings a lot at that spot. Kayshawn Elliott, who the Bears actually took in round 5, was there. Jalen Kilgore was a guy who I thought was going to go potentially in the 3rd round. He's chilling out there. Emmett Johnson, running back, who I think went to Kansas City, if memory serves. Chandler Rivers, the slot corners out there. I'll be honest, maybe some of those guys went to fit the DNA of the Vikings or what they needed or their athletic thresholds. You guys would know better than me, but there were just players that I thought were really good that were out there that I just liked better than Bredesen. Bredesen will probably end up being fine, but that was the only one that I looked at. I'm like, there was actually some players I really liked that I probably would have liked a little bit more for Minnesota in that situation.
It is just tough to take a tight end who has 12 career receptions and decreasing reception numbers every single year he played.
Yeah. That's basically it. Yeah.
No, Max was probably my number 2 least favorite pick. And this is one that could come back to bite me here, but I'm going to stick with Sam Roush for the Bears. And now that's someone, this is one where we could look back on this if the Bears, go on a Super Bowl run or something. I know they want to play more 12, 13 personnel, and that's Ben Johnson, right? He's trying to do this. I'm not saying I'm smarter than Ben Johnson. I just know, personally speaking, I'm like, man, blocking tight end in the 3rd round, that to me doesn't excite me. Now it's one of those things like an offensive lineman, you draft them. A lot of people won't know their name, but then on Sunday, if they're pancaking people and you're running wild, you feel great. So if Roush winds up being, a key cog in that Bears offense, which he very well might be, I could sit here and I'll have to eat the words. But when I saw that name pop up, I was like, good, fine by me. Go get a blocking tight end. Like, all right, good luck. Again, it could come back to bite me, but I'd go Roush.
I felt the same way about the Roush pick, Paul. That is also my least favorite. And I do have to say, I thought I must be wrong about this guy. So I went back and watched a lot of his Stanford tape. And I am increasingly puzzled at why he's being profiled as a blocking tight end. This was how he was used at Stanford. But he has some of the shortest arms among tight ends drafted this year. He doesn't have a great first step. He made a lot of his money in college blocking guys who were smaller than him, which in the NFL was just a tough way to make a living, even at 6'6", 270. Look, the Bears were number 1 in 13 personnel last year. They ran it about 9% of the time. And that increased. You can even project a big increase going into this year of maybe 20%, which would be historically huge. And it's just difficult for me to see a 3rd round pick going to a guy who might only be on the field 20 or 25% of the time. And even then, that's assuming it works out. Tight end historically has been one of the most difficult positions to draft in the NFL. There's no other position like it where the stars could be taken in basically any round. And no matter how early a guy goes, they might just bust. So it's difficult for me to get behind that pick for Chicago. And I think this was clearly Ben Johnson saying, I want to run a lot of 13 personnel, but I'm not sure that's a great way to approach the draft when you're making an early pick in the 3rd round.
The tight end run was one of the crazy things in this draft, and clearly Chicago got caught in that a little bit. I liked Roush pick a little bit more, but I certainly understand the argument that both of you guys are making.
I think you could even zoom out and just say the Bears 3rd round, right? You could say Roush, and you could also go to, what was it, Xavier, right?
Xavier Thomas.
Yeah, the LSU receiver. That's the round to me where at the end of next year, I believe we'll look back on it and go, okay, Chicago's, all those needs you said, Ziggy, defensive end was arguably the biggest. It was one of them that all Bears fans were saying, if you said, hey, are they going to draft a defensive end or any edge rusher? I think every Chicago fan would be like, at some point, yes. And they go the whole draft without one. If your plan is on, you're hoping Austin Booker takes a leap, you're hoping Odenigbo comes back healthy, you're kicking Shamar Turner out, who you also need to be healthy. There's a lot of ifs on that edge for Chicago outside of Montez Sweat. It's been a question for a long time. I'm just a little surprised that they didn't add to that room with some of the concerns they have.
No, it makes sense. All right, Ziggy, you get to lead us off on this one. Biggest reach, questionable moment, WTF moment, anything that just left you puzzled and scratching your head.
I feel bad beating up on the Bears here, but I'm going to do it one more time. This is an NFC North pastime, and that surely is going to go over well in Pack-A-Day. The Xavier Thomas pick it felt like Velus Jones 2.0 for me for the Chicago Bears, where it's this is a guy who was not particularly productive in college. He's a little bit younger than Velus Jones, which is nice. He has some straight line speed. But if you go back and watch the tape, it's he was a gadget guy who could do some add value on special teams. And that's just I was very surprised to see the Bears saying in the third round, as Paul said, you have a lot of needs. And even then, there were so many wide receivers on the board, right? Chris Bell was there, Skylar Bell's there, Elijah Surrent is there. Like, there's a lot of guys, if you're looking for speed, who were more productive in college and sort of more easily profile into the NFL. To say, we really need the guy who most people have profiled as a seventh rounder, who was most productive as a special teams guy at LSU. I was very surprised to see that pick on the board.
I like it. All right, Paul.
I don't think there was anyone in this class where I really leaned back and went like, wow, that's just a horrendous pick. Yep. But I will say again, to make it a little more personal, Ziggy's pick, Jake Golday, his favorite pick, was one where I definitely leaned back and went like, wow, okay, I did not see that coming from the Vikings, especially when you looked at Emmanuel McNeil-Warren was someone I liked. He was still on the board. Safety was a big position of need, even if Harrison Smith decides to return. And you guys take Cisse, the Vikings have a cornerback need. They felt like there were some guys at bigger positions of need available. And again, I'm not really mad about the pick, but it definitely surprised me to the point where I was like, oh, okay, like this is that second round pick right now that if he's not good and just a special teams guy, I'm going to get annoyed a year from now or 2 years from now. So I'd go Golday.
All right. I think that's fair too. I like him. I think he's going to fit really well in the scheme. But
a lot of people like him. Yeah. But in the moment at the draft, I was just, wow, I can't believe we went there.
All right, quick honorable mention is what you said before, Paul, about just the Bears not drafting a defensive end in the entirety of the draft. That to me is a pretty big what the heck moment of what happened. But while the only thing I would say that I wasn't like totally shocked is just because we kind of saw it coming. And I know that there's some salary cap implications, and maybe this is cheating a little bit, but trading Greenard to me to the Philadelphia Eagles is still to me like just he is to me. I think he's such a good player. I really, really like Greenard, and to trade him inside the NFC and give him to the Eagles. The 2 third-round picks is fine, but when we're starting to draft blocking tight ends with third-round picks, if I can have a couple blocking tight ends or Jonathan Greenard, I'm going to happily take Jonathan Greenard. And again, I know the salary cap plays a factor here as well, but that to me is still a little bit head scratching for a team that's still trying to obviously compete and get in the rest of this NFC North conversation. Trading away what again I believe is a very, very good defensive end is an interesting way to go about doing that.
They clearly think they can compete, right? I mean. That's why they're swinging for the fences.
Sure.
Yes, but I do think you have to keep in mind players we have coming up as free agents next year. Andrew Van Ginkel, Brian O'Neill, TJ Hawkinson. We're going to have to make a choice on there's a lot of choices that the Vikings need to make. And I think what this means is they'd much rather have a wide receiver too than to have Van Ginkel. And they think that Dallas Turner can take that next step.
Fair. We knew it was sort of coming. At least there was a good possibility of it, but still in the moment, I'm just like, man, I would try to find a way to keep that guy. I guess if I were
to Philly
to Philly too. Yeah. Get him to the AFC, please. Could you not get him to the AFC at least? All right, biggest steal. I'll start with this one. I'm actually going to go a couple honorable mentions. Jager Burton and Charles Demings were two that I really liked as late round guys for the Packers and Vikings, respectively. But I'm going Bears on this one. Jordan Vandenberg was somebody that the Packers brought in for a top 30 visit and spent a lot of time watching his film because Green Bay tends to take a lot of their top 30 visit guys. And Vandenberg was a guy I just fell in love with in the process. I think for a late 6th round player who he ended up on Daniel Jeremiah's top 150, he was somebody that I would have had no issue taking in the 4th round. For Chicago to get him in the 6th, I thought was a really good value. And he could be somebody that I think we look back at and say, even if he's like a 8-year rotational defensive lineman, I don't know that it's going to be anything, super crazy, but I think he could go on to actually have a pretty solid NFL career for a late 6th round pick.
I really like the Denai Dennis Son pick that you guys had. It's 6'6", 260 freak athlete defensive end in the 4th round.
Yep.
Yeah. Penn State, 8.5 sacks last 2 years. Like that has all the makings to me of like, that's a great home run swing to take as position you need. And if he works out, I mean, that's a scary guy. Kind of like, the Michigan edges have worked well for the Lions. Well, Penn State edges right now look pretty good in Green Bay. So maybe add another one there. Micah Parsons isn't a bad guy to learn from either. So I thought that was a really solid pick from you guys.
All right, Ziggy.
So for me, I'm really excited to see what Keith Abney is going to be able to do in Detroit. I love his athleticism. I love guys who have been productive and are very young when they're entering in the NFL. And obviously there's some coaching that needs to be done. He's a little bit undersized even for that athleticism. His technique's not totally there. but he's going to fit great in Detroit. He's aggressive. He loves attacking receivers. I think he's got a lot of promise as a run defender. He came in and did a really good job at Arizona State, which now seems pretty obvious. There was a lot of talent there. But when he came in 2023, that was not a program that was very competitive. I think that he could do a lot of work for a team that really needs cornerbacks who can make plays in Detroit. I think that it makes a lot of sense for him to go there. And I think that it could be a good pick for them.
I like it. All right, let's continue on. This is one of my favorite categories. And Ziggy, you get to kick us off. Player you're most jealous of that went to a NFC North foe that you wish was, in your case, Minnesota Viking. In my case, I wish they were a Green Bay Packer.
Maybe I'm hating on the Bears so much because they have the player I'm most envious of. But I would just love to have Dylan Tiedemann. The Vikings need a safety. And while I'm not going to hate on the safety that we picked, Dylan Tiedemann was a really good player in college. He's everything the Minnesota Vikings needed. I think he's going to be able to do a lot in Chicago, even though I'm generally not a huge fan of taking safeties in the first round unless they're guys like Kyle Hamilton. He's just so aggressive and so effective and basically everything you want out of an NFL safety. I really wish that he was putting on purple next year.
All right, Paul.
Yeah, I feel like I could actually double up on the deny Dennis Sutton pick here, but I'll try. I'll go with a different Packer just for the sake of keeping it different. I really like the Cisse pick. I getting cornerback when you have that room, and I'm sort of a little jealous. Just you guys got him because it was such a need too for the Packers where. I've seen cornerback rooms when when you can't stop anyone. I think the Vikings are okay at that position right now. I feel comfortable with the three they have, but one guy goes down and all of a sudden that room gets a little murky. So I like the Cisse pick. That was, again, a need for the Vikings. Goes one pick after we take Golday, someone that we're going to have our eyes on throughout the year.
Paul takes a Packer. I take a Viking. I'm going Caleb Banks. I'm jealous.
You love this pick. This is great.
I'm jealous of the home run swing. I think he has, again, he could end up being out of the league in 2.5 years, for all I know, just because, again, he's that type of risk reward. I said before the draft, I thought he's the biggest risk reward prospect in the entire draft. And so I'm just jealous that you guys get the lottery ticket of this. This could be Chris Jones, or this could be just absolutely nothing. And I think he goes to a great spot. I think he's going to work well in that defense. I think they're going to use him as a penetrating player up front. And I think it's going to work. All he has to do is stay healthy and get him motivated in that defense. And I think it's going to work. You guys have had some really great defensive tackles over the history of the Minnesota Vikings. And I'm worried that Banks is going to be the next one. And like I said, I just like the home run swing in this particular draft. So
it is just funny to hear a Packers fan saying the pick that I really wish we had was a highly athletic guy who needs to develop a lot on the defensive line. Because I feel like you guys have done that story a lot and it's basically never worked out.
It's true. The interesting thing for me is going into the draft, Caleb Banks was potentially going to fall into the second round. At least that was some of the thought process. And there's the thought of could he get to the Packers pick? And I'm like, man, it'd be fun, but that's a still a big risk even in the second round. And then the Vikings take him in the pick 18, 17, 18. And I'm still I still love it. He's so freaking talented. And there's nobody that I put on the tape more that I watched that I was just blown away by. And then I go watch Jager Burton's tape, and Jager Burton, I watched 8 games for Jager Burton in the last 2 years. And there's only one time he got beat bad. I'll give you one guess who beat him bad 2 years ago. And it was Caleb Banks. He just completely nuked him, and he didn't get nuked by anybody in the entire tape that I watched. He got beat a time, but he was able to recover, or maybe it was a little bit more of a slow burn where the guy got the best of him eventually. But there's only one guy who nuked him, and it was Caleb Banks. So every time I watch him, I fall a little bit more in love. So that's the one I'm jealous of a little bit. I get to also go with another Minnesota Viking for my next category, which pains me a little bit more as well. A pick that's grown on you after the dust has settled. And I'm going Jacoby Thomas here because Jacoby Thomas was a player that I really liked throughout the process, but I kind of just in my mind was more probably 4th, 5th round pick. And, I didn't really consider him more of that 3rd round player. And then I think about it a little bit more of how much I liked him when I watched the tape. And then again, going to a system that I think he's going to be a perfect fit in. That's just my reasoning. So I went with Jacoby Thomas on this one. I
loved his quote. Anytime I line up against somebody else with an opposite jersey color, they're taking food out of my mama's mouth. That was just a beast line. And I'm not a Notre Dame guy here, Ziggy and I don't like you, Miami, but I love that quote. And I think that's a great pick, Andy. I'm going to go actually with Caleb Banks because that pick was made. I you could see on our live reaction when Ziggy starts reading the injury history, I just put my hands on my head. I'm like, oh God, here we go.
Nightmare. Yep.
Sharif Floyd is the first guy I think of, right? Defensive tackle, Florida, high upside injuries. That didn't really work out. But you're partially to thank for this with the way you've talked about, and Ziggy has kind of come around a little bit too, I think, to where now I'm like, all right, you know what? Maybe I am okay with the home run. So Caleb Banks, really like to pick it first. Ziggy talked me out of it. Andy Herman talked me back in. I'm cool with it now.
All right, Ziggy.
Man, I wish Caleb Banks could tackle. Right. The most baffling thing I found watching his tape was for a guy with that much athleticism. Like Brian Flores is going to have to take him back to square one, because I've just never seen a player like that who's that big and that dominant just miss tackles. For me, it was Caleb Tiernan was the player that grew on me the most. I was going to go Caleb Banks, but we've talked enough about Caleb Banks. A lot of people were surprised, including myself, at least a little bit, to see the Minnesota Vikings go tackle. Obviously, there's a chance he could move inside, but you just can't have enough big athletic guys on the offensive line. We've got a huge decision coming up with Brian O'Neill going into this offseason. Darisaw has been hurt so often. Like, he has only played a couple of full seasons for the Minnesota Vikings. Like, we need depth there. And a guy who was productive in the Big Ten, where you have to face a lot of effective pass rushers, a guy who's really good in run defense. I think that he's going to be good for Minnesota. I think the fact that he's versatile on the offensive line is really important for us, because we sort of have half needs all over. And even though it was a little bit earlier than I would have liked, and there were a lot of needs and a lot of players available, the pick's grown on me, and I'm really excited to see what he can do.
Yeah. All right. I like it. Let's go with the next one. Player who will have the best 2026. So may not have the best career, but who will be best this year in 2026. And Ziggy, you can start us off.
I interpreted this as who's going to be the most productive in 2026. Yep. And for me, the easy answer there is Derek Moore. He only has to beat Wonham, and he's going to be starting on that Detroit defensive line. He has Aiden Hutchinson right next to him to take a lot of pressure off. He was extremely productive in college. I think this is a great situation for Derek Moore to come in, be the number 2 guy, and immediately produce.
I went with another line. I went with Blake Miller here. Put him in a right tackle. You're kicking Sewell over. Again, as I said before, during the line segment, helps shore up that offensive line. I really like that pick.
I'm going with Tiedemann. I think him and Bryant, the safety class or the safety groups in the NFC North are just ridiculously good. Obviously, Evan Williams and Xavier McKinney for the Packers, and then I know the Lions have some injuries, but when healthy, Branch and Joseph are really, really good. We just talked about like the Jacoby Thomas pick. I know that it's a little bit down from where the safety position's been with Harrison Smith in his prime in the past and things like that. But now I think with Kobe Bryant and Tiedemann in Chicago, I think they've formed a really solid duo as well. And I think he's going to have a really good start to the 2026 season. And I just think he probably has a really great career as well, which is our next one. Which player in the NFC North draft classes has the best overall career? I'm just going to go Blake Miller. He was my favorite pick from before. We talked about him, and I just think he has a 10, 12-year career. I may end up being more of like Brian O'Neill or Brian Bulaga or, somebody like that. It's just maybe never a all-pro or Hall of Fame type guy, but just a rock solid, 10 to 12-year, really, really good right tackle.
You take that. You take that any day of the week. I'm going to go with a little bit of a swing for the fences here.
Love it.
I'm going to say Logan Jones. If you give me an Iowa offensive lineman, if I could steal someone, Jennings Dunker, right before the Vikings picked in the 3rd round, you give me a guy named Jennings Dunker out of Iowa. Yeah, sign me up.
I just have to ask, have you seen a single Jennings Dunker snap?
No, I don't watch Iowa football. But you have a guy named Jennings Dunker who's hucking hay in competitions out of Iowa. It works out. I mean, Andy, I've gone off on this before. Give me a guy, Creed Humphrey, sign me up. Gray Zabel, sign me up. These are guys who are just born to play offensive linemen like Jennings Dunker. But back to the Bears, Logan Jones, I know that it was a little bit of a controversial pick. Garrett Bradbury's there, who apparently is a good center, but I still have my questions about him. So get Logan Jones and read what the Iowa people say about him. Replacing Tyler Linderbaum, a lot of them think he's better. And the Iowa people, they watched a lot more Logan Jones than I have. So I'm gonna believe him there. And I thought it was a really good pick actually from Chicago, despite some of the blowback.
All right, Ziggy, who you got?
I'm not going to beat the allegations of this one, but I'm
Here
going
we
to
go.
take a swing here in a different direction and say I think it's going to be Brandon Cisse. Now, like I know that the Packers cornerback development has not been great in recent years, but
Nope.
Jonathan Gannon is in the building now. He knows how to coach corners. That's what he did for most of his career. I love guys who break out and are extremely productive from day one in the SEC. I mean, he's not even 21 yet. He turns 21 in July when training camp's half done. I know, Andy, you're not super high on his run defense, and certainly there's ups and downs when you watch the film, but I thought his instincts were really good. I watched the Virginia Tech game. That's sort of the one I looked at. And while the physicality wasn't always 100% there and the technique wasn't 100% there, the instincts were really, really good and I think are coachable. And I just think in Green Bay, if the pass rush can get figured out with Keyshawn Nixon and Brandon Cisse just as like two relatively aggressive, relatively high value corners, I think that could be a very strong cornerback duo for Green Bay going into the future. So I like where he landed. I like the player. I like the prospect. So I'm not going to read into it too much. I think it's a very good pick. And in a draft where there really weren't a lot of stars taken in the NFC North, we didn't have a lot of early first round picks. You can go for a second round corner and roll the dice.
I like it. I hope you're right. That'd be fantastic. Green Bay's overdue for a really good corner. I know. Fair enough.
That's good.
All right. Next one is best fit. So team fit, the player that just fits perfectly with their new team. Ziggy, you're up first on this one.
I'm going to double dip, but that's okay. I think it just has to be Jake Golday. Again, there are very few systems that can take better advantage of an off-ball linebacker that can play corner and can rush the passer. This is what Minnesota does extremely well. And there's a role for him in Minnesota too, right? Like Ivan Pace was a guy we were really hoping would develop into someone like this, but is really just a pure pass rusher. Brian Flores is weird. He likes having guys that can do things that nobody else in the NFL can. Paul, I know you're not happy about this, but I cannot help but see him as a productive player in Minnesota.
Well, I'd be happy. Yeah, I'd be very happy if he is. You don't have to apologize.
All right, Paul, who you got? Best fit.
I'm going to go with Derek Moore here. The Lions were 26th in pass rush win rate last year. They lose Al-Qadim Muhammad, who was, him and Hutchinson made up, I believe, over half of their pressures last season. They need replacement there. Yeah. So I'm going to go with Derek Moore.
I had just four names down. I think are all fantastic fits. I did have Golday for Minnesota, Blake Miller for Detroit, Sam Roosh for Chicago, and Logan Jones for Chicago. I think all of those are perfect players that fit within the schemes that all of those teams are asking them to play. All right, we've got three more. The third to last one here. It sucks that this guy is going to be in the division for the foreseeable future. I went with Dominique Orange, thick citrus, big citrus. And again, the reason why I'm ticked off about it is because, again, so many Packers fans wanted Dominique Orange when they took McClellan. I like McClellan. I have no issue with that pick whatsoever. I probably would have taken Dominique Orange if given my choice between the two. But it's one thing to be like, all right, Orange went right after. It's another of now like, all right, now Orange went right after Andy went to the Minnesota Vikings. So now we're going to have this comparison for like the rest of eternity. And I think there's just that nervousness of this. Is this going to be like, when they passed on TJ Watt or when they took Josh Myers over Creed Humphrey? And if it is one of those, now not only does that suck that you took the wrong one, but the right one went to Minnesota. So it's a potential nightmare all the way through. So I'm pissed that Dominique Orange is in the division.
I am on the same thought process as you, Andy. Now, I'm happy the Vikings didn't go with this pick, but I'm going to go Dylan Thieneman here because of being in Chicago. And he was someone, I believe, you looked at 90% of mock drafts, they had the Vikings going there. Yep. And we wind up taking Banks, which I know you like. I like going D tackle. But if Thieneman turns into the next, Harrison Smith-esque, like the NFC North safety who's there for forever, it's going to be one that we look back and go, wow, I can't believe we lost out on him to Chicago. Again, happy that we didn't make that pick, but he's someone who, if he's good, I'm going to be really, really upset.
Ziggy?
Last year was a wonderful respite for three NFC North teams because the Detroit Lions offensive line was the weakest it's been in some time. But then they go in and add Blake Miller immediately, who we're going to have to face. And I remember I was reading a story from Dabo Swinney about how Blake Miller, when he came into Clemson... What? I'm not calling him. I'm pronouncing it Swinney. That's how it's spelled. That's how it's getting pronounced. I'm not giving Clemson any respect as a Notre Dame fan. But he got a text from their starting right tackle like 4 days after Blake Miller showed up. And he said, Coach, you got to bench me or move me to guard because Blake Miller is just a better player than I am. Which, like, starting fourth-year players don't usually text their coaches saying, like, I suck compared to this true freshman. So the thought that he can go into Detroit, immediately make an impact, immediately improve that offensive line, and just stick around as another big guy dominating defensive lines in the NFC North, I'm not looking forward to it.
That's a good answer. I'm not too happy about that one either. We've got two left. We've got worst draft class and best draft class. Let's save best draft class for last. Let's go worst draft class first. Ziggy, of the four teams, who had the worst draft class?
For me, it just has to be Chicago. I felt like this was a team with a lot of needs at a lot of position. I felt like they reached on a lot of players when their defense had a lot of needs. I did not feel like there were any picks that are likely to deliver a lot of value to them. And I know the Chicago Bears are coming off a great season. They were 11-6. They were first in the NFC North, but they're not a team like the Rams that can maybe afford to lose value now to try and take things that they really need. I don't think the Bears are a Super Bowl contender. And the way promising teams have their windows closed is by reaching on players and avoiding positions where they can get a lot of value. I didn't like the Bears draft class. They might prove me wrong, but I think it was clearly the worst in the North.
All right, Paul.
This is really tough for me. I actually don't think anyone in the North had a bad draft, by the way. I'd probably say the one I'd raise the most eyebrows with was the Vikings. With just given the home run swings, it's Banks and Golday to me are the guys where it's like, all right, it could be great. It really could be great. But all the injuries for he's grown on me, yes. But I'm really worried about those injuries. It's a little safer with Blake Miller and Thieneman in the first round picks. And I value the first few rounds a lot more than the later rounds. And I know a lot of the draft people can get into the weeds on all of it. But for me, that's where you're usually getting the big impact guys. And the Banks pick is so it is so risky that to me, I'd say, all right, probably the Vikings here. But I don't think that doesn't mean it's a bad class. I just think the rest of the whole division kind of drafted okay.
So the answer for me is a little bit interesting in the fact that I think if you were to grade it based on what you were given in the draft, so from a Packers standpoint, right? Based on not having a first round pick and only having 6 picks, and I know they traded around or whatever, I think Green Bay did a really, really good job not having a first and only having 6 picks. But if you had to tell me like if I was starting a franchise, right, and I could pick from the draft classes, the one that I want the least is the one without a first round pick and the one that only has 6 players. So again, I think if you're grading on a curve and the fact that Green Bay didn't have a first round pick and only had 6 picks at the end, all right, I think they did a great job with it. But I would just say overall, just because of the lack of picks, and even in those 6, one of them's a kicker, and not having the first, I would say that Green Bay ended up with the least amount of overall value in this draft, even if I think they did a great job navigating a more difficult situation.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. That if you're giving me one of the draft classes, the one I'd want least is Green Bay's. But again, if they're picking the first round, that's probably
for
different.
sure.
Yeah.
And then same thing, right? If we are counting, a half of Micah Parsons in this as well, then we can make that argument too, which I love even more. But if we're just basing it on the players that each team got, I would probably want the Packers least of the 4 groups. And this is interesting because we had 3 different ones you would think then the Lions, so I guess would be the one that wasn't the last 2. We all picked the Lions, but I actually liked the Bears as the best draft class. So I'm going to disagree with Ziggy on this one a little bit. A couple of reasons. And I actually fully agree with Ziggy's assessment of, I do think value matters, and taking a safety, a center, a blocking tight end, a gadget wide receiver, there is a lot of very questionable positional value that you can get out of that draft class. This had a lot more to me to do with, I really liked Thieneman. I really liked Logan Jones. I really liked Sam Roosh. I really liked Malik. Actually, I liked Malik Muhammad. I didn't really like him, but I liked him especially. I liked him more in the 4th round. I really liked Keyshawn Elliott, and I love Jordan Vandenberg as a 6th round pick. And I do believe that, while again, Xavier Thomas, not something I would have done, I actually like a team planting their flag like once per draft class and just saying, I know this pick is crazy. Yeah, we don't need to make a habit of doing this, but we love this guy, and damn it, we're taking him in the 3rd. Screw everybody else. I actually kind of like a little bit of that just cockiness almost. So I actually liked their draft class just based on the players and my evaluations of them going into it. I think they ended up with a lot of players that I liked. So to me, it was between them and the Vikings. And I just knocked the Vikings a little bit simply because they traded away Greenard, and I kind of put that in the process as well. So I went with Chicago.
Yeah, if you include Greenard, it was tough. That was a tough day to be a Vikings fan. I'm actually going to go with Detroit here. I really like their first two picks, as I was saying before, with the Lions. That felt like we're addressing the big needs for a contending team right now. And if they work out, they'll be instant contributors to a team that feels ready to ascend back to maybe even the top of the North.
All right, Ziggy, finish it off. Who you got? Best draft class.
I do just have to say the last 3 third-round flag plants for the Chicago Bears were Kieran Omega DJ, Zach Pickens, and Velus Jones. None of whom made it 3 years with the Bears.
They're due.
So I'm just saying they can plant their flag, but I think the best draft class was Detroit's. Detroit just got back to doing what makes them successful, taking really big guys, knowing the kind of football they want to play, looking for players. I felt like this time they were a little bit more attuned to maybe value than they have been historically, which I think is a nice development. But value always has to be in the context of what is this team? What do we need? And what are our goals for the future? And I just felt like Detroit did all of that really well. I think they're going to get a lot of early production. I think they're going to get a lot of sustained production. And I think we're going to look back on this as a draft class that brought Detroit back to the top of the division.
Yeah, it's fair. And again, Blake Miller was my favorite pick in the draft, and I really liked Derek Moore. I think Rolder and Abney were solid picks in the 4th and 5th. So I have no real qualm with that whatsoever. I thought they had a good draft overall. Just after the top 2, it was a little bit more underwhelming, and not having a 3rd round pick is probably why I didn't have them aggressively as the top team. But I think you can make an argument for a few of these draft classes, which I think one of the cool parts of today is we mentioned a lot of different players, both good and bad. We mentioned a lot of different draft classes, both good and bad. I think overall, like the overall feel of it is, I think all 4 teams did a pretty darn good job given what they had for draft capital and given what their needs were. I think it's a very interesting overall group of players, and there weren't a ton of picks in this overall group where I'm just like, what the hell were they thinking? And so overall, I liked it.
Yeah, you could have gone any way. I mean, like if we record this tomorrow, there's a world where I convince myself the Vikings have the best draft class in the NFC North. Like I really think it's very close between the entire division, and the Vikings were a little different again with the strategy of like, all right, we're going big here. But I like, Chicago too. If Roush works out, it's a great, should be a great draft for Chicago. They're all solid classes to me. And have a lot of guys that should be able to come in and impact the team.
All right, fellas, final thoughts. Anything you want to get off your chest, draft related or other, before we get out of here?
I do just appreciate that the Minnesota Vikings would rather have a guy have a broken foot than Javon Hargrave. For every Packers fan that's excited about that, I know, Andy, you're hyping it up. We took 2 defensive tackles. Again, we'd rather have a guy with 1 foot he can walk on than Javon Hargrave. So weigh this carefully.
Yeah, the tape from Minnesota last year is not super enthralling. I'm going to go through it again coming up soon for an episode that I'm doing. But yeah, first glance at it was not the most exciting experience in the world.
You'll have to stop about halfway through the season because that's when we benched him.
That's when he stopped.
Perhaps the most important guy in this draft class, and we only briefly mentioned him, was Trey Smack out of Florida. Because we'll see when the Packers, I don't know if he's going to, who knows if he winds up kicking for them this season or not. But if Green Bay gets into the playoffs, probably be a 7 seed, you could see a big kick down the road for them. And that could be the determining factor of whether or not we're sitting here next off season saying, all right, special teams dooms them again, or wow, can't believe the Packers went on that Super Bowl run. So Trey Smack, someone we didn't really talk about, but best kicker in the draft. I mean, that's someone like, it's always amazing to me how the kickers, go so late in the drafts, and if they work out, are such impact players.
I'm not going to be the one to say it, but Trey Smack was 2 for 5 against the Long Island University Sharks. Don't look at what he did for the rest of the season. If you're a Packers hater, just watch him miss 3 field goals against the Long Island and enjoy that. That's the only time you can really see him miss all season. But
you can't be expected to make kicks against Long Island. That's just that's a tough ask for anybody to have to do. I think you can have some accident forgiveness for that. Guys, I cannot thank you enough. Always appreciate catching up with you guys. Like you said, it was far too long. We'll have to do it again this off season at some point for sure. Any again, final thoughts? Anything you guys want to plug on the way out?
No, listen to the show, guys. Paul Farrington Show on YouTube. Pack-A-Day, Andy Herman. Two good shows, a great collaboration, and hopefully we have some more this offseason.
Ziggy?
That's all for me.
All right. Well, appreciate everyone watching. I guess, do your skull thing if you want. Go Pack, go from us. But thank you all for joining us. We'll see you soon. And until next time, and as always, we love you guys.